Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's our Monday night edition, and it's really a few hours now after the 5 o'clock, right around 5 o'clock it dropped, that John Calipari is now on the board. First commitment as Arkansas's head coach. Head Hog has brought in from the portal. You talk about importing from Big Blue Nation, from Kentucky, young man from Croatia, 7'2", Zvonimir Ivicic. And this player is a guy that really Calipari and his staff worked really hard not only to get over from Croatia. He's a native of Croatia, but it was quite a chore getting him eligible this year, getting him to where he could play. So you're looking at conference play, league play, played 15 games, finally got him in uniform and got him on the court. And I'll never forget, I was tuned in because I'd heard some good things about him and was watching Kentucky had a home game against Georgia. And the guy knocks down 3 threes, 13 points in his first career game in the Division I level at Kentucky. It was a really good game for a guy that hadn't sniffed the floor. And you know, if you remember, Arkansas had a similar situation with Keon Minifield Jr., and he had some good games early. But Big Z, man, just carried on 7'2". I think he's somewhere between 230, 240 pounds, great length, really light on his feet, quick. One of the things I really like about him is not only the stroke from three. He didn't take many. I mentioned he made 3 against Georgia in that game, and he made 3 more the rest of the way through 15 games that he played. But he only took 16 shots, so 6 of 16, 37.5%. Here's a guy shooting nearly 58% from the field, well over 70% from the free throw line. So when you start looking at his splits, they're really, really good. Low volume on the threes, but he's a guy that can stretch the floor because he's got a really nice touch. And what I like about him, I mentioned he's light on his feet. He is athletic. He's got great length as a shot blocker and finisher above the rim. But I watched Kentucky, as good as that team was offensively, when he was on the court. A lot of times when you see a big man, especially 7-footer or more, not only getting up and down is a problem a lot of times. It's not for him. He's very light on his feet and kind of, you know, he's a long strider, but he gets up and down. But even in half court, Kentucky did a really good job with really good offensive players of flipping the court, getting the action going side to side, left wing, right wing. And a lot of times your big men, if they set that screen action in two-man game and they either pop or they roll, a lot of times when that ball moves quickly, they have to get turned around and they're not always on time with face getting to where the ball is or moving to the right spot at the right time. He is so light on his feet, and his floor IQ and his instincts are really good. So I noticed in the ball action, when it flipped the court, left or right wing and vice versa, whether in transition or half court, he's really good with his head on a swivel, getting turned around and being part of a play. He's the kind of big that can, I mentioned shooting the three, he can pop him out, he's going to knock that down. If you watch him on shallow rolls in two-man game, he's a good decision maker with the basketball. He could catch it in a shallow roll or a pocket pass off a high screen, take one dribble or one step with a pivot, he's already to the basket. Or he might throw a lob pass or kick it out. Against Georgia in that game, he rolled off a pick. The ball went right. He caught it in the middle from the right side and made a behind-the-back pass, almost a no-look pass to the left wing for an open three-point shooter, and that was a bucket. You know, and I mentioned the stats against Georgia. I think that night he had 3 or 4 blocks, 13 points, efficient night in his first game. Later on against Alabama, a team that would go on to the Final Four, Kentucky won a big home game, 117-95, I believe. We know both of those teams could score. But Big Z had his career high 18 points, very efficient game for him. Had another 3 knocked down in that game, but he had, I think, 4 or 5 block shots, a handful of rebounds. So let's look at his stats. And here's a guy that was, you know, playing less than 12, right around 12 minutes a game, 11.7 minutes, 5.5 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 1.3 blocks per game. And I mentioned the shooting splits and the efficiency. But when you consider those stats, you go, well, I'm underwhelmed. Well, it's 11.7 minutes per game. And here's a Kentucky team that's got a lot of size, length, and guys that have been playing on the front line. Let's not forget this is John Calipari recruiting. He's got a lot of options on the front line. So they bring Z along, and you look at those numbers, man, extrapolate those out to per 40 minutes. I took a look at that earlier. Nearly 19 points per game, over 11 rebounds per game if he were playing 40 minutes, and between 4.5 and 5 blocks per game on a 40-minute night. So those are per 40-minute numbers. They can be misleading. when you're looking at a guy just playing over 11.7 minutes per game, because we're not sure moving into year two where exactly who's going to be with him. This is the first scholarship player, by the way, at Arkansas for John Calipari. We know it's unprecedented times with no scholarship players. That's what Calipari inherited. And this is a great start because, first of all, there are going to be plenty of guards, whether coming out of Kentucky, what's available maybe from Arkansas, sit in the portal, who knows, other schools in the portal. Some of that recruiting class at Calipari, a lot of these guys, 4 of the 6 are already. We're going to go through all of this. We're going to get everything tonight. We're starting with Big Z because that's the first big splash. Big commitment for Calipari at Arkansas. But you don't coach 7 foot plus with his skill set and his agility and his ability to cover ground like he does, get above the rim, get out of his area to block shots. And I notice when he gets like offensive rebounds, for example, a good offensive rebounder, but he's quick. He's quick decisions. He's not having to gather. A lot of times with big men, when they get the ball, they have to gather. They're a little methodical. And I notice he's really good with not only keeping the ball high, but just reacting with skill when he gets a shot up. And he can pass, like I mentioned. So he's someone I really enjoyed watching when you kind of break down his footage and what he does. It's not about you, Danny. Well, I'm not sure what all we're getting here. By the way, this has been an interesting weekend because we thought going into it, or at least I did, that there might be some splash stuff coming out over the weekend, and it didn't work out that way. The last time I was on with you good folks, Razorback fans, was late last week, and so thinking going into the weekend, we may have some stuff come out. Big Z didn't get in the portal till Saturday. Then news came out earlier today that he was going to meet with Mark Pope, the new Kentucky coach who was introduced over the weekend. That doesn't surprise anyone. You got to do your due diligence as the new head coach at Kentucky, a guy that's a legacy there, won a title there under Rick Pitino in the 90s. I remember Mark Pope. I remember his game. He was a good player. That's back in the day when Pitino and Nolan were both playing 10 to 12 guys, sometimes 13 guys. And not everybody was getting heavy minutes, but guys had roles, and Mark Pope was one of those guys for a while, but just leaving from Utah. But he met with Big Z today, and within the same day, Z's off the board for Calipari, the first commit again for the Arkansas Razorbacks under John Calipari. And look, I think it's great that he sat down. He put out a statement, his commitment statement. The first couple of paragraphs talked about not only meeting with Pope, saying this was going to be a great fit for Kentucky, would do great things there. Really enjoyed the meeting, appreciated that. He was appreciative. Thanked Big Blue Nation, the Kentucky fans for, he went through a lot. I mean, but beyond midseason, he's cleared and finally gets to play there in league play. Ended up playing 15 games total. He's talking about some of the process of interacting with Kentucky fans on and off, not being on the floor. And then when he was, he mentioned the billboard that they did for him and the free Big Z or free Z billboard that was out there. So he talked about that in the statement. And then the last paragraph was all about the Hogs. And he's really looking forward to the opportunity, staying with Calipari, moving on with Calipari. And as he pointed out, I'm just paraphrasing this, not only is he a guy that can help, that he wants to win national championships, but he also wants to go to the NBA. And he sees Calipari as the best single option as far as a coach that can do both of those things. He effectively said he can combine those two endeavors better than just about anybody out there. So this is part of the majesty and the draw, the trappings of the John Calipari name, and why he's had so much success over the years, because perception becomes reality. Over 40 players at Kentucky that he's put in the NBA draft. When you add it all up, over 50, when you go back to Memphis and UMass and, numerous All-Americans, first-round draft picks, lottery picks, guys that are all pros. I mean, he's got a guy that's going to be in the final 2 this year for the MVP race, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I've got to cover in high school, see play in person at all levels, including his one and done at Kentucky. But there's a guy that's, so when you look at what Calipari's done, you understand why players are going to play for him. And this is just one off the board. I think more guys potentially, we're going to go through some of the names. We're going to stop talking about Z here. I've just got to stress again, don't focus on the stats here. I'm going to give you a couple of player comparisons. One of them's a little bit old school. You got to go back to the 2000s. Paul Gasol, the Spaniard, and Hall of Famer, won titles with the Lakers, teaming up with Kobe. The three-point shot wasn't as prevalent then, but he was a career 36% shooter from three. He didn't take one per game, didn't even attempt one per game, but he was adequate when he stepped out behind the line and had a little craft in his game, could pass. Not exactly the same kind of player, but a lot of these guys that are playing in the NBA now, a lot of the foreign national players that are in the game that are 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot plus, you're seeing them stretch the floor more and more as 3-point shooters. Can do a few other things. So there's several of those. I won't run through all the names, but there's multiple guys like that, and some of the stuff he does and brings to the table reminds me of that. Remember, when he runs the floor, this guy's light on his feet. He spaces out well. Like, he can flare out to the wing, and you think of a big man running the court, well, you're thinking getting on the wings and then closing in for a dunk, but he can actually flare out, space out to beyond the 3-point arc and catch a pass out there and get up a shot, a 3-point shot that looks good. It's also going to be difficult in a half-court offense when he does pop off picks to leave him out there by himself, because he is he has got a nice stroke. Percentage-wise, it was it was really good, 37.5%, only 16 attempts in 15 games, so about one per game on average. So we need to see more, but he's a guy that when you look at the shot and the release and the quickness on that release, it gets his feet set, he gets squared, he looks like a confident shooter. And so, again, I think this guy's a multi-dimensional weapon on both ends because of those light feet, because of the length, because of the athleticism, and then I really like his instincts as a player. I love the floor IQ because, again, he understands how to turn the hips, get turned around to the action, whether it moves on the right to the left and the ball's reversing or skipping over. He's able to track it. Again, a lot of big men, you have to understand, are not great at that. He's going to be really good for Arkansas. Projecting him, I can see anywhere from a 20, depends on who Arkansas brings in on that front court. And we're going to go through some names of possibilities. There's some good ones out there. But just based on what we have right now and what we see right now, he's a guy I could see anywhere from probably 16 to 24 minutes. That's a pretty big gap, but I think a lot's going to depend on who's on that front line with him. And there may be scenarios where he's a 25-minute a game guy in terms of an average. Certainly, based on performance, matchups, things that are going well or not working, you'll see those numbers fluctuate like you would with any young player. Remember, he'll be a sophomore. And only 15 games in his belt, so on some level, it's a little bit like Trevor Brazile, who didn't play a ton as a freshman at Mizzou. I think he missed some games there. Of course, he was injury-prone and missed a lot of games in parts of 2 seasons at Arkansas. But just as a comparison standpoint, coming in as a sophomore, you might look at them just in terms of experience and playing time. I think Brazile probably had a little more, but there's some similarities there in terms of expectations. And this is a young man I think is an NBA player. I think his future is definitely going to be in the NBA because of the strengths and the stuff I talked about. And again, I really like the fact that some other things before I move on to other players. I'm going to spend some time. We're getting close to 15 minutes. Big Z is going to get 30 a game. One of the other things, when you look at Arkansas's portal recruiting under Eric Musselman, a lot of question marks with guys, not necessarily on talent or what they could bring to the floor, but exactly how do they fit? How do they buy into his messaging? We saw problems every year until most seasons around mid-January. He got things turned around, got guys on the same page, Arkansas off and running. Last 2 years, not as much in league play. Certainly last year, it didn't work at all. It was a complete problem. And you have a lot of guys coming in, right? Big portal hauls every year. And so there's going to be some hit and miss there. Last year, it wasn't a talent issue. It was more about meshing and guys buying in. They just never did. They just really never did. And so I think one of the advantages is Calipari's known as a the one and done era, a guy that can go out and land you multiple McDonald's All-Americans, 5 stars. He's also done some good work in the portal. What's interesting about this is technically it's a portal commitment, but it's essentially a guy just returning to play for him and just at a new school. It's a guy who's familiar with him. It's a guy, there's loyalty there. Obviously, that goes both ways because the player wants to commit and the coach wants him committed, wants him in the program. And so I think there's some added value in a guy that's already been in his system even when he wasn't playing, he's learning what's expected at Kentucky or playing for Calipari. In other words, who is Kentucky until he's not. Now he's Arkansas basketball. And so you've got the advantage of a guy coming out of the portal where you know a lot about as your head coach, the staff you're bringing in. There's just a lot of stuff here that makes sense in terms of continuity. And you're getting if you don't have anybody, if you got 13 open scholarships and you're starting from scratch, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're bringing in a guy that you have familiarity with, and it's basically a guy you've been coaching. In a sense, it's almost just carryover. And aside from the technicalities of moving from Lexington to Fayetteville, you're getting retention. This is an effect. This is effectively retention in recruiting. I know that sounds strange, but that's what it is, and that'll go for the other guys. I mean, DJ Wagner, a legacy in the Calipari coaching tree. When you look at his dad and played for Cal, Grandpa played in the state of Kentucky at Louisville, but DJ Wagner, McDonald's All-American in the 2023 class, as a young man. To keep an eye on and see if he went to the portal today, and he's somebody I think will probably. I think Arkansas is in great shape. I'll go ahead and say it, not knowing for a fact that he's Fayetteville bound. That Calipari would probably be in the lead here. That puts Arkansas in the lead for DJ Wagner. 6'3" combo guard. Another young man I've seen play in person in the spring and summer grassroots levels. Had a lot of head-to-head matchups with Layden Blocker, as a matter of fact. They came in the same class, but once upon a time, the number one rated player in high school was a five-star, again, McDonald's All-American. But DJ Wagner, just under 10 points per game, 9.9 points per game, 3.3 assists last year, 1.9 rebounds, a good assist to turnover ratio. I think it was a little better than 2-to-1 if I remember. Didn't shoot the three ball, just under 30% there, just over 40% overall field goal shooting. But a young man that does step to the free throw line and he's competent at the foul line. But he's a guy that battled some injury issues. It was a really loaded Kentucky, freshman class. When you look at Reed Shepherd, not rated as highly, but Reed had and Robert Dillingham, who was a five-star, both of those guys in the backcourt, really big years. And then you had Antonio Reeves, the scoring machine, and we know what he did to Arkansas. So you had a jam-packed backcourt at Kentucky. But I think DJ Wagner would be solid at Arkansas and solid for Calipari. And again, you're talking about a freshman last year who's been in the system, knows the coaching staff, knows the expectations. He's a guy just in the portal. Let's see if he puts his name in the NBA draft pools just to test it. We'll see if he takes visits and what he does. And then we'll see if he's one of those that's quick off the board and heading to Arkansas. I do think Arkansas's got to be the favorite for DJ Wagner. I'm not going to make a prediction, but I think Arkansas is the favorite there and wouldn't be one bit surprised if we hear that sooner rather than later. And then Kentucky has another couple of players, some news today on one of those. Aaron Bradshaw, he was the first player for Kentucky into the portal. Aaron Bradshaw off the board today, the 7-1 sophomore. Talk about from that really highly rated recruiting class. I mentioned some of the backcourt players, but Aaron Bradshaw, 7'1" forward, more of a forward than a center. Didn't have the greatest season this year, about 5 points per game in limited minutes per game, but first in the portal for Kentucky. Now he's off to Ohio State, so committed to Ohio State. That news broke today. And Bradshaw is now out of the portal. So is Big Z to Arkansas. And so what's left in the portal, I mentioned DJ Wagner going in today. Adu Thero, the 6'8" wing, he was a sophomore, has played 2 years under Cal. He's going to test the pro waters, I believe. We'll see how long that goes. But a guy that averaged over 7 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, long at 6'8" and long, athletic, and an instinctual player when you talk about just making plays, hustle plays, very active, and a guy that I think could be in the mix as well, maybe later down the road. And we'll see. We'll see about that. So you had 4 total for Kentucky in the portal, 2 of those out today. I mentioned Bradshaw to Iowa State, Big Z to Arkansas, and then DJ Wagner, we'll see, but I think Arkansas could be in the lead there. And then we talk about Thero and what he's doing and looking at the pro game as well. So moving right along, we know that Tremont Marks, speaking of portal players at Arkansas, Arkansas had 4 that I thought would be maybe in play for this coaching staff. Tramon Mark's off the board. He was probably the guy I thought was the least likely of the 4, but I had him on my list simply because of the way that he plays. The ball sticks a lot with Tramon. He's a tough bucket getter. He's not a guy that gets a lot of separation. He doesn't move the ball really quickly. He kind of sizes dudes up and figures out how he's going to get to spots. And then he figures out a way to create just enough space to get off some really tough shots. 6'6" wing, good length. Was a mid-range king at Arkansas. And a guy that the way that he plays, he was a volume scorer, obviously led the team in scoring. But the way that he plays, I think, probably not the best fit for, I think, the way Cal wants to play the game and wants his guys to play the game. He's always tailoring the game around the talent that he has and the strengths of players, but he's also trying to get guys where he can tailor it to what he prefers to do. And not that against Tramon Mark, really good player. I just think the way that he plays is probably best for him. And he's off to Texas Longhorns. So Hog fans will get to see him in this upcoming season with the Longhorns in the SEC. We'll see when the schedule comes out. Can't wait for that. Is it a round robin? Is it home and away? I don't know how they're going to do scheduling now that you've added Texas and Oklahoma. I'm just going to set things aside for a minute just to talk about it. But Arkansas has permanent home and aways with 3 teams every year, and then they rotate 2 more on the schedule, so you have 5. And I would like to see Missouri's one of Arkansas's permanents. I say permanent. They can change these things, but it's been static that it's Missouri, LSU, and Texas A&M. And I'd really like to see Texas. I'd like to see Kentucky in part of the permanent rotation. And if you left Missouri on there, fine. When one of those other 2. But Arkansas's program and the branding with Cal, I think deserves an upgrade on the round robin. I just do. And I think it's fitting for Arkansas and Kentucky to play twice a year, every year, just like they did the last 2 years, but only once before that in the history of Arkansas being in the league. And I want to see Texas on there. I want to see that because of that Arkansas, we can joke about it that Texas doesn't see it as a rivalry, Arkansas does, but back in the day in the Southwest Conference, outside of football and just about every sport, those 2 were typically the standards for the league for the most part, even if Texas dominated the football series. So that's what I'd like to see. That's my opinion. You guys can weigh in. Tell me what you think about that. Okay, so Tramon Mark off the board. We know Devo Davis. He's been making the rounds on some visits. Grand Canyon, Florida Atlantic, Oklahoma State. I had someone in the program at Oklahoma State call me a couple of nights ago. Was it last night? These days are running together. Just asking a little bit about Devo and maybe some things to prepare for when he was on his way for his visit. So these are some stops for Devo Davis. I am told that Devo would listen to an opportunity to stay at Arkansas and have a conversation with the Cal. So he'd be interested in that. I don't mean to say that like he's being, that there's some level of arrogance. I'll listen. It's just a matter of fact that I think his ears would be open, his mind would be open, his thought process would go there in terms of a conversation about staying. Whether John Calipari also sees value in having those conversations, that's another story. Or maybe he's open to it, and we'll see if that plays out that way. It's my thoughts that a player like Leighton Blocker, who I mentioned earlier, freshman guard last year, tough kid, energy guy, brings a lot to the table, and is only going to get better as a college player. Not a lot of movement or information out there about anything that he's been doing in terms of setting up visits or talking to schools. There's been a little bit, and I've had several SEC schools call me about both Devo and Leighton Blocker, as well as some I fielded for Caleb Battle, and doing some player evals and just stuff based on my observations covering these guys. But I think Blocker would be another one. This is my opinion. That would take a hard listen. Who wouldn't want to play for Coach Cal? Who wouldn't want to stay at the home state school? Blocker's got local NIL. He's got some NIL. Devo Davis has got NIL. Not that they won't have those things if they go elsewhere, but they got a lot of locked-in advantages just being in Arkansas. Again, this would have to be something mutual. And when you're filling a 13-player roster, some of that's going to be coming from the portal. And so how much How much of that are guys you're familiar with, or guys that are familiar with the school? That remains to be seen. So far, Calipari, we've put out. I've had sources telling me he's bringing his staff with him. I tweeted that out the day before he was officially hired at Arkansas, that he planned to bring as many as 6 guys. I've already got 5 names out there. There may be 1 or 2 more on the staff that could come with him, which would exceed 6. And then, there's some other guys in play. We're going to talk about assistant coaches a little bit more. But I've kind of gone through the names of guys that are in the portal for Kentucky still, the ones that are remaining for Arkansas. There's some intriguing notions there in terms of how that could play out. And could these guys land at Arkansas? Let's go through the recruits from the high school level. This is what gets me excited, because I got to watch not only the McDonald's All-American game at the Nike Hoop Summit, watch both of those things when they were happening over the last several days. And, when you look at 4 of the 6 committed players or signed letters of intent at Kentucky that Cal brought in, 4 of those 6, 2/3 of them have already either asked for a release from signed national letter of intent, they've been released, or they've decommitted if they didn't sign. And I thought maybe 1, maybe 2 guys would be, maybe in play over the weekend for commitments. But more information coming out on some of these guys. And then another one today, I mentioned DJ Wagner going to the portal. One of the McDonald's All-Americans, national number 15, according to ESPN 5-star, Janelle Boogie Flan, 6'2" guard. Man, I am in love with this guy's game. He's got Kyrie Irving feels in his shot creation. 6'2" combo guard, can break. He's got quick twitch and skill to go with it. He can break a defender down, and now he's picking and choosing. And he's putting up little floaters with extra arch. He's getting all the way to the basket, contorting himself and making what look like impossible shots, putting them high off the glass, and they're just perfectly placed. They're not getting lucky and spinning in. The guy has craft in his game, and there's some real Kyrie Irving feel there. I don't want to be disrespectful to Flat Earther, but look, man, this guy's got it. He can step back. He's got a nice little array of step back shots that he can take. He's got a nice pull-up mid-range game, and he uses a lot of craft just to get space. He gets enough space to get shots off at 6'2", and guys are, they're really they're playing guessing games on what he's going to do with the ball, and by the time he's done it, they guessed wrong. I love Boogie Flan. He requested his release from his national letter of intent. He's a guy that I think, the things I've heard is because he's an East Coast guy, he's from New York. And he might be a guy that is looking to stay out east, or going to look at plenty of options if he decommitted asked for the release from Kentucky from that signed letter of intent, which he's done. So as of today, so we'll see about that. But I think again, Calipari, these guys want to play for him. It's why they signed with him. And I say edge advantage, John Calipari. I think Arkansas. If I had to guess, Flan, I'd say Arkansas is the most likely spot. We'll see what happens, but I really feel good about most of these guys, and I'm going to go through a couple more that we talked about the last time I was on with you, because I got to see them in addition to the McDonald's game, then playing this Nike Hoop Summit over the weekend. And I mentioned Flan is ranked 15th, a 5-star, according to ESPN. What I didn't do is give you stats. In the McDonald's game, 17 points. Made half his threes, I think 3 of 6 from 3, made both of his free throws, 6 of 14 overall shooting. You'll take that. But he had 5 rebounds and 3 assists. So he was active, and he wasn't just taking shots. Man, is he a talented shot creator. And he can finish, man. He's just got the chops he's probably got more skill than I've seen any guard in his class. When I really start breaking down the dribble drive craft, and then the different ways and different levels that he can score from at 6'2", and he's a willing passer. He can facilitate. He can set the table because he can get by the first guy. And now he's picking and choosing. I mentioned that beautiful array of scoring craft, but then again, he could set guys up and be a facilitator. And I got to see that early. I tweeted this highlight out as soon as it happens. He and Jaden Quaintance, who I'm going to talk about next, hooked up on an alley-oop pass, lob from Flan in transition. Flan actually created 2 or 3 turnovers just by his activity and his instincts, especially as a weak side reach-in guy, just kind of anticipating, really high floor IQ. Created a turnover on the one end of the court, and then ran out, got a pass. was dribbling up the left side and just threw over a defender who tried to get back in transition for Jaden Quaintance for the dunk. And so I'm going to talk about Quaintance now, the highest rated of the 5 stars that signed with Kentucky. He's a young man that's also asked for his release from his signed national letter of intent. Remember, there's going to be a difference between asked for release and has already been granted. So both Fland and Quaintance have requested those things. Quaintance is a man-child at 6'9", can play the 4, play the 5. This guy, he's 16 years old. He's going to be playing 2 years in the college level. And I really think it's advantage Arkansas. Now, it's been reported that he's going to take a visit to Louisville. Keep an eye on that. You never know. His minutes were limited in both the McDonald's game and in the Nike Hoop Summit. So when you combine the minutes in both of those games, 15 in the McDonald's game, only 9 in the Nike Hoop Summit, so 24 minutes. He scores 14 points on a combined 7 of 8 field goal shooting. He was 2 of 5 at the free throw line in there. If he made some free throws, he'd scored a little bit more. But in those combined 24 minutes, 14 points in a big, just huge rebounding numbers when you look at the 24 minutes. 12 rebounds combined, 11 rebounds combined. He had 4 steals in the McDonald's All-American game. He did have an assist, and he had 3 assists in the McDonald's All-American game, and he had 1 in the Nike Hoop Summit. He had some breakdowns defensively in the Nike Hoop Summit when he played in the first half, and he didn't play really in the second half till the final 2 minutes, and he started making plays there. But what I love about Jaden Quaintance, at 6'9", he is sturdy. He's got great length. He's got those explosive hops, but the guy just tracks the ball around the basket. He goes after the ball, and he's got a nose for it, man. He's just got a knack for it. He's got a nice touch around the basket. He'll finish lobs with big dunks. He'll get out in transition and finish big dunks. But he's got shooting touch. He can face up. There was a play in just the Nike Hoop Summit game where he caught a pass and turned. He caught it not facing the basket, and he was facing the left side of the floor around free throw line extended, maybe a little higher out, 15 to 17 feet. And he just turned to his right, caught it facing left, pivoted right, and went straight up in one motion and just stroked a mid-range shot. It was nothing but net. He's got touch. He can step out and shoot some threes. Boogie Flynn and Jaden Quaintance, load me up. Fill the plate high and deep, please. These guys both, you understand why they're McDonald's All-Americans. Quaintance is a top 10 guy, composite national number 8. And again, 16 years old. He's just scratching the surface. If Calipari gets him for 2 years, look out. Boogie Flynn, Arkansas is hoping to get him. The McDonald's All-American I thought might be off the board first for Calipari, and of course it didn't work out that way. It's Big Z. It's Carter Knox, the 6'6" wing. He started his career at Tampa Catholic, been part of that overtime elite program last year, put up big numbers, 24 points per game, nearly 6 rebounds per game, nearly 3 assists per game. And he's a guy that's shooting around 35, between 34 and 35% from 3, if I'm remembering correctly off his stats. I got to go back and check that. I think I got the rest of his stats right, but had several 30-plus point games playing for overtime elite. And he's a guy that decommitted. He committed to Kentucky in March. He's not signed on the letter of intent, so he decommitted pretty early in the week last week, and it was before Calipari was. It was already known that he was on his way, but it was before the official announcement, I think, by a day or two. So he decommitted. I think Arkansas is in great shape with Carter Knox. Obviously, everybody knows on Instagram he's made the Chicken Man reference. I think Carter Knox is very much in play for Arkansas. But another guy, 6'6", explosive. He's one of those alpha slashers. Bouncy dude, strong, sturdy. He's around 220 pounds at 6'6" on that frame. Fearless slasher to the basket. Like I said, he tries to dunk everything and punish people. But he's a guy you can post up in the mid-post. Some of that reminded me of Stanley Amudi a little bit, but he's a little more slick with it. Some step-back stuff off mid-post work. You can put him on either side of the basket in that mid-post, and he could take smaller guys in and deal with them that way. Adequate three-point shooter, again, I think that work in progress there, but he's a guy that's he's a scorer. Boogie Flynn's a scoring point guard, combo guard, if you want to call him. Carter Knox is an alpha scorer, has that kind of mentality. He's a guy that, because of his good length at 6'6" and how strong he is, and the athleticism, able to cover ground quickly. He's one of those guys that from the wing that can block some shots in transition or come over on the help side or from the weak side and actually get up and elevate. He gets a lot of deflections using his quickness and anticipation. And to me, you can have all the physical stuff, but a lot of these guys, when I watch them now, the way you earn your top 25 status, because Knox is, I think in the composite rankings, he's not only a 5-star, but he's in the top 20. So all three of these are top 20 recruits. In the case of Quainton's, top 10. But you have all the physical stuff, but you also have just a ton of basketball IQ and instincts, and instinctually making plays. And so I understand why these guys are so highly rated. It's been really quiet. I'm going to mention the other guy who decommitted no, Cyril has actually gotten his release, his letter of intent. Somto Cyril, ranked number 46 in the ESPN top 50, a 4-star, 6'10" center that played in Overtime Elite this past season along with Carter Knox. He's another guy I think. Now he's going to, he's talking to Mark Pope just like Big Z did. He's got a list of schools that have contacted him. It's been reported he's going to take some visits. We'll see if he does. And if he does, I still think Arkansas is in great shape. If Calipari wants to talk him into coming to Arkansas, he's a guy that I think. So those are 4 of your 6 that are now basically told Kentucky, see ya, or going to look at other options at minimum. Z's been the first one to talk to not only go in the portal, have a conversation with Mark Pope, as far as we know, and now in the same day, effectively, 2 days after going to the portal, the same day talks to Mark Pope, the new Kentucky coach. He didn't kiss the ring. He didn't kiss the Pope's ring. He kissed Calipari's ring here in Fayetteville. But so Somto Cyril, keep an eye on him. This guy's a man-child as well. 250 plus pounds. He's a space eater. He's a guy that I noticed does a really good job of anchoring himself, using that big frame in the paint, down low, pinning defenders, and then he releases pretty well. He's got he releases pretty quickly for a guy his size. And then you can lob over the defender or get separation by just nudging him a little bit and get him some passes, and he's up to the rim. He's got good lift for a guy that size. And he's a guy that he operates mostly in the paint, and he's going to get some hard downhill rolls off of high screens. He's one of those hard roll guys. We'll see. I haven't seen enough of him in shallow roll or pop. My instincts are, my thoughts are he's a much better player the closer he is to the basket, but he's a guy. And for Overtime Elite, playing just 20 minutes a game, over 9 points per game, over 9 rebounds per game, over 3 blocks per game. So when you extrapolate out his per 40 minutes, it's 18, 19, and over 6.5 blocks per game. Of course, that's Overtime Elite, but it was really good numbers when you look at the minutes he played, his efficiency. I think he was 66.7% shooting from the field. It tells you he gets everything just about at the rim. And he's a cleanup guy. He'll get some offensive rebounds and stickbacks. And I mentioned, if you get him in transition, he's a train, man. Going to be hard to stay in front of him. But those are the 4 of the 6. Another guy I really like, big time hops. You talk about his pops, played for Calipari back in the day. Billy Richmond, national number 39 according to ESPN, top 40 guy, another 4-star. Playing in Memphis, at Camden High School in Memphis this past season. But he's a guy that's been quiet on him. But he's a guy that could get in the portal, ask for his release at any point in time. And then I think Arkansas obviously would have an inside track there. We'll see. And then the last guy is Travis Perry, 6'1" guard, Eddyville, Kentucky. Crazy numbers he put up scoring in Kentucky high school. He's probably the one guy out of the 6 and he's top 75. ESPN's got him 71st. 4-star guy, Mr. Kentucky basketball. He's the one guy I don't see coming and following Cal. So the other 5, I think there's a pathway and probably a good, really percentages favor Calipari. If he wants any or all of those 5, he's probably going to get them. He may not get all of them. I can't say that with all certainty and with 100% absolute. But I think Arkansas would be in play for all the other 5 and certainly probably be the favorite. And we know Calipari has already rewarded someone for loyalty. He's a loyal guy. That's one thing about Calipari. He's brought in Big Z, and that's not just a loyalty play. That's because the guy can play and help Arkansas. It's a great first start. We started the segment out. Thank you for joining me, HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm probably moving a lot more tonight. It's excitable time, especially since I haven't been here in a few days. Haven't been doing these daily, so I'm trying to get caught up. I've kind of been running down a list from stuff. Let's look at the portal because reporting today came out. I can't take credit for it. I did put it in my Hoop Hogs recruiting tracker. But Jamie Shaw with On3 Sports has some, and it's what I call premium material. So they have a paste part to their site. So I'm not going to go through all 5 school names. Folks can go and pay to read that, I guess, or it'll leak out another way. But Arkansas is one of the 5 schools in the mix, apparently, here, late stages, out of the portal. And everybody remembers this guy, Jonas Adu, 6'11", 7-footer, guy that really had a big year. Second team All-SEC at Tennessee, the league champs. Over 11 points per game, over 7 rebounds per game, nearly 2 blocks per game. And a guy that's playing in the high 20s in minutes, didn't get to 30 on average, 27, 28 minutes per game. So those are really good numbers when you look at the minutes. And then his efficiency, 51.5% shooting from the field. Doesn't take a lot of threes, but he'll step out and shoot a little bit, not much. But only 63% at the free throw line. But this guy can be a big presence on both ends of the floor. Defensively, big motor, big athlete. Cooked Arkansas's bacon last year. 29-point loss in Fayetteville. We know that. And this was the part of the season, Valentine's Day, February 14th. The season was pretty much shot at that point in terms of an at-large opportunity. But you had a top 10 ranked Tennessee team in the house, the leader in the SEC at the time, and Tennessee just hung a big one on Arkansas in that game. And Auburn had already been in there for a 32-point win, 29-point win. But Adu, what did he do? 23 points and 12 rebounds, was 11 of 14 from the field, and Arkansas couldn't stop him. And I remember that game. He was playing above the rim, getting it easy in rolls, rolling to the basket. Just about every scenario imaginable, he just dominated the Hogs. Arkansas didn't have anybody on the front line that could come close to touching him. And so he's in the mix. We'll see where that goes. There hasn't been a lot of portal news in terms of Calipari since he's been at Arkansas in terms of names. Dre Davis out of Seton Hall, 6'6" wing, was the first one. We've already talked about him. We'll see what kind of future holds there. 16 points, 6 rebounds, and over a block per game at 6'6" combo forward. Got a who's list after him. But, Calipari's it's not going to be one of those, frenzy at the, a frenzied mad dog at the table when there's when there's meat everywhere. It's not going to be like that in the portal like it was Musselman for John Calipari. The portal recruiting will be very much more measured. You won't see the name Arkansas spread out all over the place on a lot of that stuff. And so far, in a matter of a few days, that's been the case so far on the portal recruiting. Some other names that Kentucky was looking at in the portal, there were a few that I kind of caught my interest. B.J. Freeman, when you understand losing a guy like Antonio Reeves, B.J. Freeman, 6'6" wing, scored over 21 points per game at Milwaukee. One of those guys that could maybe help fill a role like that. And you look at Arkansas, and you're losing guys like Caleb Battle and Tremont Mark. I don't know if Battle will be in play or not, but Mark's off the board. And you need some big wing. You'd like some size on your wings and guys that can score and go get buckets. And you look around the SEC, there are a lot of those guys. Antonio Reeves for Kentucky last year being one of them. So, B.J. Freeman, would he be someone that might be in play? There's some other names out there. I mentioned Dre Davis, different kind of player, but a guy that can do multiple things that Calipari's been in touch with, I believe, since arriving at Arkansas. But Jonas Adu, that would be huge. Whoever gets him, again, second team All-SEC. Maybe a case there for first team, but he had multiple. I think he had 8 double-doubles this season. I think he had a few more games where he had double figures in rebounding. And he had that monster game against the Hogs, 23 and 12. But, I mentioned B.J. Freeman, there are a few more players I'm intrigued with. I'm not going to go through some of those names tonight that Kentucky was looking at when Cal was still there early in the portal. I think some of those are still available. And I'll spend more time on some of those things later. 45 minutes in. Thanks again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We're a few hours separated from the commitment, the first commitment for John Calipari at Arkansas. Zvonimir Ivisic, Big Z, 7'2", long, athletic, great feet, light on his feet, gets up and down really well, plays well. You talk about getting up and down end to end really well, but also guys that can play in tight spaces. It's one of the things I really liked about Khalil Ware. When I started watching him I think it was an eighth grader, seventh or eighth grade, and he was about 6'7" long, and he had a hard time getting up end to end at that time, and his end to end motor wasn't great. But one thing I noticed about him is that his motor in tight spaces was really good. He didn't just stand in ball watch. He did a good job for the most part. Now he would be up and down sometimes with his interest in the game, but when he wanted to, he could move around really well and get to the rim, get for putback dunks, stickbacks, being active. And so when I look at Big Z, I see a guy that moves well, not only end to end, but in tight spaces. And I mentioned it earlier, when the ball shifts from one side to the other, when you reverse side of the court, not just reverse end to end, but side to side, he does a really good job of reacting to that and being ready. Hands ready to receive. And he's following the action. A lot of big guys struggle with that. When the ball's moving crisply, and he's one that doesn't have problems with it. He's got that three-point touch. All right, so we've gone through the 6 players that Kentucky signed. That 2/3 of them 4 of them decommitted or are getting out of NIL. We've talked about what's in the portal for Kentucky. Left over after 2 off the board today, only 2 remaining. I think Arkansas could be in play for one or both of those in there. We'll see if Calipari has interest in what's remaining in Arkansas's portal. And I really think the focus there would be on guys like Devo, Layden Blocker, and potentially Caleb Battle, if at all. If at all. I'm not trying to say there will be. I just think that all of those guys would listen, would be open to it. I can confirm at least one Devo Davis would, but we'll see. I mean, these guys may be ready to move on too, and then we don't know yet if Calipari would have a real interest in that. 12 more scholarships to go. You know, I've thought about this, and the idea of not filling up a roster and maybe keeping it shorter, cutting it short, 10 or 11. I mean, that's possible. I don't think that's probably the best way to go. And I'm going to tell you why. Injuries, other things that come up, foul trouble. You start talking about 13 players, you're like, well, do you really need all of that? I think you do, especially because it's going to depend, too, on what kind of depth you have at each position. And so how balanced can you be at each position? Calipari likes to play more guys typically, not always, but typically if he can. But at the same time, each position, you're an injury or 2 away or foul trouble away from being in a tough spot, maybe for stretches of games or different things. One thing I like about Big Z, he doesn't foul a whole lot. He blocks a lot of shots. He just plays a smart brand of basketball. But he's one guy. How many frontline guys do you put around him? I mentioned some of the names that are available. 2 of them that were signed with Kentucky out of high school. I mentioned Adu. I didn't bring up the beast, Clifford. Big Clifford. Clifford, the big red dog out there at Rutgers. I mean, we've talked about him. The previous staff had him on Zooms. They were working that. Kentucky was in the mix for him. Omarui, 6'11". 1 more year to go. Put up really good numbers at Rutgers. You talk about a mountain of a frame and a guy that can play, and a rim protector and a rebounder and a guy that can do the work around the basket. He's another name that's out there. I left him off, but I'll bring him in now. I said I wasn't going to bring any more in, but I'm talking front line, so I'll bring that in. But the point is, each position, I think, how much depth are you going to have? Those are questions. And I don't think you can have too many bodies. I think, and then not only for games, but practice. You just want to have options. Again, injuries and other things that come up. You just never know. And so I think you fill out your roster if you can. I don't see any good reason not to, unless you're just getting bodies to have them. If you do that just to get through practices and just to fill it out, then you might want to get guys that are their time expires after a year, so you don't have to run them off. I don't know. There's more than one way to do that. But I'm one of those that I'm not saying what he'll do, and I'm not going to tell John Calipari what to do, but I'm saying if it were me, just for those factors, I'm trying to get all 13 and fill all those in for those reasons. But then, we'll see what happens. Yeah. And look, I mean, you look around the SEC. Chris Beard was the first name on Arkansas's big board for coaching, or so we thought. Hunter Yurchek kind of set the record straight on that in terms of what he said during Calipari's introductory uh, ceremony. No reason to discount that, but Beard is a hot name in college basketball as a coach, and certainly what the work he's done in the portal already with big men. The Belmont big that started his career, Malik Dia, off the board today at Ole Miss. Recently got the talented forward with three names out of Greensboro, the one that hurt Arkansas, one of the two that really hurt Arkansas. Mikel Jones, Brown Jones, one of those. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I've got those probably reversed in my head right now. So I covered both options. 50 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I really enjoyed going through what the possibilities are for recruiting. Let's talk staff. First of all, I want to say this. I want to mention this. Josh Pastner worked for several years as an assistant under Calipari when he was at Memphis, took over as the head coach at Memphis, later was a head coach at Georgia Tech, was a Conference USA Coach of the Year, was an ACC Coach of the Year at Georgia Tech. Is a guy that's had success as a college coach. He's gotten teams to the NCAA tournament. Got to have a nice phone conversation with him tonight. I really wanted to pick his brain as much as I could about Cal and some things. But I tweeted this quote out earlier because I thought it was really interesting. But he says within 3 years, within 3 years, Calipari is going to have Arkansas at the doorstep of competing in the Final Four. He goes, he'd be shocked. He corrected that and said, I'll be surprised. He said shocked, and then he changed it to surprised if that doesn't happen. And so I thought that was interesting. He thinks he's got a real desire to win at a high level here. This is not just about running off in the sunset, which I'm getting from a lot of people. It was my instincts and my impressions being right in front of Cal at the press conference a few days ago last week. But Pastner's chiming in with some of that. We talked about it. So I thought that was a really impressive thought that he had, that he thinks his former boss in the next 3 years is going to get back to the Final Four. Look, Cal's taken every program he's been to, the first three, UMass, Memphis, Kentucky, to 6 Final Fours, won a title, got to a championship game at Memphis, title at Kentucky, 6 Final Fours. And he's probably got some of that still in him, right? I mean, who's to try to explain away the last 10 years at Kentucky other than to say it's been a high standard over there. He's done well with his teams in league play and conference tournaments. When you look at 6 titles in SEC tournaments, 6 regular season championships, everything you want. Last year, top 10, top 20 team most all season long. Talked about as a team that maybe could get to the Final Four. But having said all that, Josh Pastner thinks he's got another Final Four in. He thinks it'll happen at Arkansas. So I thought that was interesting and worth talking about. Some of the other talking points we have, and I've put this out, Calipari is, and I tweeted this out a day before he was officially announced. There's been reporting since then, but at least 5 staffers that should be coming with him when you look at his assistant coaches, Orlando Antigua, Chuck Martin, Chin Coleman. Those are his 3 main assistants. They're expected to follow Bruiser Flint, longtime Cal guy going all the way back to UMass, special assistant. Calipari's son, Brad, I don't think any surprise there. He was at the ceremony, by the way, on Wednesday, but he'll be a player development in a player development role. So those are 5 names right there. And everybody's talking about Kenny Payne, the longtime ace recruiter for Calipari before taking over at Louisville the last 2 years. We know that set off a bunch of dominoes when he was anticipated that he would no longer be at Louisville after 2 really difficult years there. Program obviously struggled. It was kind of writing on the wall for him there, but I continue to hear that Kenny Payne is likely going to be added to this staff. We'll see, because here's a guy that's been a head coach. How much can you compensate him? How do you shift the guys that are coming? Because remember, I just mentioned the first 3 assistant names. Those are your 3. You can have up to 5 assistants now. That started last year, but only 3 can still go on the road and be recruiters. And so someone, if you bring on a Kenny Payne's got to transition to a little bit different role, or someone might leave at that point. You just don't know. And so I don't want to get too deep in the woods, not knowing for sure it's going to happen. But Josh Pastner is another one who told me he thinks that's probably more likely than not that Kenny Payne will be on board. And he thinks Passer said Big Z's just the start. He's going to get more guys that were either committed or signed or out of the portal from Kentucky. He thinks there's more to come there, and he thinks Arkansas is going to have a good team next year based on at least the talent level and what Calipari can do with it. So I thought all that was interesting, having that conversation. It reaffirmed a lot of the stuff I'm already hearing, good source information. And now it's just a matter of more names coming off. Thought I was going to see some going into the weekend, maybe as soon as Friday, Saturday, and then it was Monday afternoon, really after close of business, 5:05, somewhere in there. Big Z was off the board. I loved reading his statement. I put all the statement quotes in my article, my commitment article that we tweeted out, a link to HogvilleNET. You can also find it at KNWA's website, Pig Trail Nation. Good stuff in that. And I broke down some of the stuff with Z and what he brings to the table. But go watch his film. Go watch footage of him. Go watch his highlights. Get as much if you can. Eat that stuff up. It's fun. It's also refreshing to see somebody that's 7 foot plus that has all these soft skills and understands how to use them already. And again, he's a work in progress. 15 games last year as a freshman, but to show the talent, to show some of the abilities he has, and on big stages, it's not like he played 15 games and most of those were against some cream puffs in non-conference. This guy was banging, against SEC teams, and at 7'2", 235 maybe, somewhere between 230 and 240 looks to me. He's sturdy. He's not, and a guy that moves really, really well. So it's a really excellent start for Calipari off the board with that. I'm thoroughly impressed with the beginnings, and I think there's more good names, big names, capable players to come as the era of John Calipari, really tips off now. When you start talking about building a roster, 12 more to go. We'll see if he fills all 12. I just gave reasons why I think that's the best way to go. We'll see. Man, what am I leaving out of here? I don't think a lot. I think we've covered most of it. We're getting close to an hour here, and I'm going to sign off at an hour, 57 minutes in. I did see some questions rolling up, so I'm going to see if they come back on the screen, and I'm going to try to get to some of those. Got my better set of eyes on. They just come up when they want to. There's been several that have rolled by. Cal was sick of Kentucky. He looked sad standing on the court at UK. Big Z might need 30 more pounds for the SEC. I don't think so. I'm not saying don't put on any more weight, but 30 pounds, no. I could see him biting Kentucky in the butt. Hey, Kevin, always enjoy your reports. Who do you think will be the next commitment? I mean, it's a great question. I thought maybe Carter Knox and Somtu Cyril, one or both of those guys, maybe over the weekend. Now we're hearing Cyril's, looking at taking visits, and there's a list of schools that he's interested in. So we'll see. Carter Knox, I don't know. I mean, I would guess that one. Anybody that puts Chicken Man on his IG account and he doesn't have to wait to wiggle out of a national letter of intent, he just decommitted because he just committed to Kentucky in March. Just going off of just guessing, I have no idea. I really don't. I don't know how fast some of these other guys are willing to move and get off the watch. What do you think about Quainus? Man, I think he's extremely gifted. I think he's one of the, look, I'll make a player comparison with him, and I'm old school, so I like to think about some of these old school guys, but I love Sean Kemp at 6'10", sturdy, 225, 230, athletic, had a little bit of skill. He could shoot a little bit, face up a little bit, could put the ball on the deck and get by guys and glide into the rim. He's a 3-time All-Pro, 6-time NBA All-Star, mostly with Seattle Supersonics. Remember that group? They called him Rain Man, but a guy that could obviously play above the rim, one of the fiercest dunkers. And Quainton's got a little bit of a package that reminds me of that. And so when I look at I mentioned he played 24 minutes combined in the Nike Hoop Summit and the McDonald's game. But 14 points and 11 rebounds in 24 minutes, and it just, so much of it seemed effortless. One play, he battled in the Nike Hoop Summit toward the end of the game for a guy for a loose ball rebound, and just not only ripped it from him, but turned to the basket, got to the other side of the basket with ease, and just laid it up and in and drew a foul and was shooting a free throw. I mean, he just does things where you go, not a lot of cats can do that. Not a lot of cat. Some of it almost looks effortless. Some of his rebounds almost look effortless. And he's, at 16 years old, 6'9", and I don't know what his weight is, but it's got to be well over 220 or somewhere around there. But man, this guy is a stud. And 16 years old, so you're going to get him for 2 years. I mean, to me, I'm moving heaven and earth. Hello, NIL. How are they going to divvy all that up? I mean, what did Z get? These are things that, you don't hear a lot of numbers unless they want them out. So you don't hear a lot. But I think for a guy like Quaintance, you might have to, he's a guy that might command about as much as anybody. And when you think about it as a 2-year deal, a lot of that's because of that, because it's extra value. You're going to have to probably up that ante because of that value you're getting. You're getting a McDonald's All-American and a likely future lottery pick, going to be projected first rounder minimum at some point for 2 years. Man, you got to you got to maximize this situation, which means you may have to come correct with that NIL money. Boogie Flan, Carter Knox, guys out of the portal. That's real. You're going to have to pay it. And, we've been told, what I've heard is initially it was between 5 and 6 million. I heard there was a pathway to get it to 7 million. And that didn't include, Hunter Yurichek's plea to fans during the ceremony to kick in. They needed everybody pitching in. And, that's when you ask for stuff like that, is when you're bringing in a John Calipari and you're having the big party there and you've got him on stage, waving at the fans, interacting with everybody. That's when you ask for money from everybody. I mean, I'm in the peasant class. So, folks like us that are like Calipari talked about Friday to Friday on the paycheck, you got to motivate the peasant class to kick in, to chip in. And I think people will. I think it was, I think that's how you do it. And you continue to drumbeat. We need the money, but you're going to have to pay guys. It's the NIL. As good as Calipari is at getting guys to the next level, building relationships, building trust, being a player-first coach, NIL's real. And you're playing it with the big boys. You're in the SEC. You're a high major conference and a high major program. And you can't say you're up there with the blue bloods like Calipari talked about. I don't think he would say that unless he saw he was putting together a full picture that helped bring him to Arkansas, which included some serious NIL jack. Some serious NIL cheese. That cheddar is going to have to be spread around. You're going to have to get it out, and you're going to have to pay guys handsomely to get them. And it's all above board now if it's done the right way. So I think folks are stepping up. Obviously, John Tyson's the big name there in terms of getting Cal here, but there are plenty of others. And nobody, I've seen people diminish Hunter Yurichek's part in this. It's on his watch, man. He gets credit. And Calipari, one of the first things he talked about in the press conference when I asked about coming to Arkansas, the first thing he talked about was tapping in, touching base with Kelvin Sampson, an elite coach at the college level at Houston, and what he had to say about working with Yurichek. So give the man credit, give everybody credit who made this happen, and then give yourselves credit for being locked in. Eric Musselman got this program excited, got everybody around it excited. He did more than just wake up a sleeping giant. He got it to get up, maneuver, do some good things. Calipari's got a chance to take it to another level. Who wants a Final Four? Who's ready to get back there? It hadn't been since Nolan Richardson. You got to go back to the 90s, over 30 years. Speaking of Final Fours and titles, earlier today, one of my good friends, Scotty Thurman, we talked at length about some stuff in the way that the landscape and the realities of the landscape for coaches now, for players, and it goes down to the high school and even junior high levels where everybody wants to get in the portal and look at an option or look at what can I get. And so in this era, even a guy like Calipari has to make some adjustments because, again, all the stuff that he brings to the table, they need to be strong in NIL for all of that to really kick in and put Arkansas over the top for a lot of guys. Because it's going to not just be what he can get now, but moving forward, he's the best to ever do it. So good luck to everybody else. That's how I look at it. Good luck to everybody else. All right, so we've gone over an hour. I am going to wrap it up now. We're just a little after 9:30 on Monday night. I do this late. Sometimes I do it really early in the morning, because I'm scared I'm going to miss something if I do it during normal business hours, because there's a lot of stuff coming out. Believe it or not, even before Z landed today, and everybody's going, oh, man, it's so quiet. It really hasn't been quiet. He went in the portal on Saturday. You've heard other, DJ Wagner in the portal today. Boogie Fland asking out of his national letter of intent today. Some of these other guys that have been asking out or we've learned more about where they might visit or what they might be open to. So a lot of information pouring out. And, certainly the Jonas Adu information today, and the fact that Arkansas is among 5 schools that may be closing in on him. Again, I can't mention the other 5. It's not my content, premium content for Jamie Shulver at On3 Sports. But there's a lot of stuff that's been kind of hidden that's important. And so the big one today for Arkansas, though, the big splash, the big Z, man, I really like this kid. I can't say that enough. Congratulations to John Calipari. Congratulations to Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball, the fan base, everybody that's paying attention. This is a really good get. To me, this is a future NBA player and one that'll be drafted. And so this is a win. It is a big win out of the gates. We may see more of them starting tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe we'll hear more about coaching hires and stuff that's formalized. I think things are going to start moving in that direction. Didn't even mention Ronnie Brewer Jr. The last that I touching base in these situations. The last I heard is still kind of on hold through the weekend, waiting to find out about that. So there's all kinds of stuff to keep our eyes on as we move forward in the new era at Arkansas Razorbacks basketball. John Calipari, the biggest name in college coaching when it comes to basketball, and the Arkansas Razorbacks have him, and now they've got his first player to come on board, coming from Kentucky to Arkansas, Big Z, Zvonimir Ivisic. Until next time, folks, see you then.